Why, hello there. So I'm not typically an early access guy, but when the folks behind the Ori series, Moon Studios, asked me to do a sponsored video on the co-op update for No Rest for the Wicked Together, I couldn't say no. It was already on my wish list for when it hit full release because the Souls-like combat looks fun and the art direction is stylish. Add on to that the opportunity to mix things up with my Night Rain crew and try out the game in co-op, and it was too good to pass up. And after a few sessions, I can safely say holy No Rest for the Wicked co-op is something special. In this video I share my experience with the game and why it's such a refreshing and empowering take on co-op. Let's get into No Rest for the Wicked together. No Rest for the Wicked is an action RPG with stamina-based Souls-like combat. It's like Dark Souls and Diablo had a baby, and that kid got Dark Souls combat and Diablo's progression and camera. You're a mystical warrior called a Serum who's sent to the island of Sakura to vanquish a plague called the Pestilence that transforms men into monsters. You develop a base and build your character by going to different areas killing monsters, getting loot, and gathering resources. And that was all the information my friends Dan, Mordecai, and I had when we jumped into the game for the first time here in January 2026. First thing, I made a character. He's giving a bit of a Vinny from Atlantis vibe.
Hyperclips, big ones.
Before playing co-op, I set up a private realm, my own personal instance of the game, to play through the prologue. There are difficulty options in No Rest for the Wicked, and I went with the Path of the Chosen, the base difficulty for this realm. There's also Path of the Torn for an easier experience, or Path of the Unspoken for a tougher one. Then I hopped into the game's tutorial where I found myself on a boat heading towards Sakura. You have a basic attack done by tapping the attack button, and a charge attack done by holding and then releasing it. You also have a crouch for stealth, and can surprise enemies with a backstab. There is a button to dodge, and you run by holding it down. Like Dark Souls, your equipment affects your dodge roll, going from a sprightly roll when light to a ponderous flop when heavy. With a shield, you can block by holding left shoulder, and you can parry by tapping it. These actions all deplete your stamina meter, which is a scarce resource, especially at the start. As far as getting around goes, you can vault over shoulder height objects, sidle along ledges, and jump over pits. You can also swim and climb, which will slowly deplete your stamina. After learning these basics, the tutorial ended in classic RPG fashion by crashing the ship. My Serum washed up on the shores of Sakura, marking the end of the tutorial. I beat on a few crabs and then hopped off because it was time to play together. I set up a new realm that was strictly for the boys and I. It's set up the same way as the private realm, but shared is selected, which makes it an online-only realm for the host and invited friends from Steam. And then we were off. We started off on the beach and set out on the surrounding area called Mariner's Keep, and we quickly learned that co-op in No Rest for the Wicked has friendly fire. It took a bit to get used to, but it's a choice that I really appreciate. With friendly fire, it matters where you are in relation to your party. You can't rush in swinging or fire spells indiscriminately. The result is a natural coordination between allies. For range combat, you react to the battlefield and keep allies out of your line of fire. In melee, you either split up targets or take turns in close combat. This really complements the stamina-based combat because you naturally need to pull back and recharge, giving your allies an opening. And the enemies aren't just pinatas to beat on, as can happen in Souls-like multiplayer sometimes. They respond well to multiple targets and attempt to keep themselves from getting flanked. The result is impressive how it all comes together so naturally to heighten the feeling of being a party of adventurers. In adventuring we continued to do, finding no shortage of nooks and crannies to explore, shortcuts to open, and cliffs to fall from. Gravity stays winning in Souls-likes. The areas in No Rest for the Wicked aren't procedurally generated, and it shows. The enemies and context can and will change as you play, but the layouts are handcrafted and dense with incident and exploration. The climbing, swimming, and sidling give Moon Studios a large design space to play in for exploration, and they take advantage of it. Traversal could occasionally feel a little clunky with a jump that didn't quite go the way we wanted, or a character failed to grab a ledge as you stepped off of a cliff. This subjected us to the fickle god Gravity, who like in Elden Ring sometimes wouldn't punish a seemingly long fall, and other times shatter all of our bones for a short drop. However, this might be tweaked during early access. In the meantime, it is a lot of fun to see your friend plummet and their portrait turn to a skull.
Oh my god.
I'm gonna grab onto that and I just...
And so we continued exploring, eventually crawling up out of the beach and into Mariner's Keep. This is where things started to gel with the party and the semblance of different builds developing between us. When you level up, you get 3 points to allocate to any of the 8 character stats. These are familiar D&D style character stats like you see in Dark Souls. And like in the Souls games, the first few levels I put into health, stamina, and the equip load stat to make myself a bit more durable and keep myself from heavy rolling. But as we made our way into the keep, I found the Pinwheel Staff, a weapon that scales with faith. With its Diablo roots, there's a lot of loot, and we spent the first 45 minutes or so swapping out gear and messing with stuff when it came in. But when I equipped the staff and saw that its special attack shot a Plague Elemental spell, I was tempted to put some points into faith. I also found some gloves that increased plague damage dealt that sweetened the deal. As expected for the genre, weapons and equipment of the same type come with different passives called enchantments that affect their viability and how you play with them. And my gear was telling me to try out some plague magic. I wasn't sure if plague was good or not, but having a little synergy with my gear and a staff that could bonk and shoot spells was enough for me. Dan and Mord were also settling into builds. Dan's staff scaled with intelligence and froze enemies that Mord could then shatter with the faith-based axe that dealt big physical damage. So we made our way through Mariner's Keep and into Orban Glades, where we eventually stumbled upon the first boss, Warwick the Torn. He was a solid Souls-style first boss with powerful but telegraphed attacks to read and react to. Unfortunately, during the fight, Mord was yeeted off a cliff by Mr. Torn and couldn't rejoin the fight after respawning, which doesn't feel like a great design. If Mord went down in the arena, we could have resurrected him by sacrificing our own health to fill up a bar. This can be done by multiple allies, so the party can tactically tag team a resurrection. Unfortunately though, Mord was out, and Dan and I managed to take him out with a combination of spell slinging and melee. You'll notice here that I pick up the loot from the boss, which brings us to another important bit about No Rest for the Wicked co-op. Loot and quest rewards are first come, first serve. You're meant to work together and share loot. No equipment or items I've seen are tied to your character because you're meant to freely trade with your party and swap gear, with the goal to make the entire party stronger. This loot system and friendly fire means that you're really encouraged to understand your allies' builds and communicate with one another. You're not just people playing the game alongside each other, you're working together. And this is reinforced even further by how you build up the city of Sacrament. After beating Warwick, we entered Sacrament, your hub that you'll build up over the course of the game. This comes in the form of upgrading merchants to offer better gear and refine raw resources, buying houses to store loot and deck out with your own crafting tables, and making other general improvements to the city. This is all cool, and these systems also necessitate working together to save up resources. No Rest for the Wicked is a game where you can pull resources from chests at merchants. Because chests can be shared, we quickly got into the habit of dumping everything we collected into a common pool. It did lead to a small queue to access the chests sometimes, but eventually we got enough chests where this wasn't much of an issue. At this point it was getting late and Mord had to hop off. Dan and I still had some time, so we began exploring a new area called the Nameless Pass. The enemies were higher level and the mix-ups more challenging, but the verticality of the level let us employ some ranged cheese to kill them. In Souls combat, every victory is valid. Eventually, our inventory filled up with loot and we fast traveled back to Sacrament to deposit resources and sell junk. At this point, Dan had to call it quits and I continued playing solo. I traveled back to Mariner's Keep and Nameless Pass to explore around more, and I noticed a couple things. The enemies on the beach changed to be more challenging, and the number of enemies had changed in both areas to accommodate solo play. The transition from co-op to playing solo feels incredibly seamless. And even though I'm the host for the realm, Mord and Dan could hop into it together or solo anytime they want. I thought that a single player game adding co-op after a few years might feel bolted on, but as this is the only version of the game I've played, the design feels cohesive and like it was always intended to work this way. We played 3 more sessions over the next few days, totaling 15 hours of playtime. My build at level 15 developed into a Faith Beefcake. Dan is a wizard firing off freezing, lightning, and fire spells, and Mord is wielding the biggest and meanest stick he can find. We further explored the Glade and Nameless Pass, finding new sections of these areas and dungeons tucked within. The size of these areas and density of content is pretty awesome, with the enemies and bosses being persistently challenging. The early access is said to be about half the size of the full release, and it feels like we barely scratched the surface on the content in the early access during our first 15 hours. It also feels surprisingly polished for a game that's not even feature complete yet. In early access, there's no starting classes and all characters have 10s across the board for their stats and no starting gear. For the full release, there will be classes to choose from with modified stats and starting gear related to their class. Offhand weapons, which seem to only be shields right now, will also be greatly expanded to include offensive options. However, in the spirit of early access, I do have some feedback. While the camera is pretty good, there are times where geometry obscures things in a way that made it hard to navigate. In boss battles, the camera seems to follow the boss, which is fine usually, but sometimes they'll suddenly change position, and your character will be hard to see as a result. And as mentioned earlier, I do think a party member falling to their death during a boss fight and having to watch their friends finish the fight doesn't feel great. Fast travel is done by traveling between the whispers unlocked in the world. These whispers have names in the menu, but their names are not on the world map, and it would be nice to be able to either see the location of the whispers in the fast travel menu, or have them labeled on the map. No Rest for the Wicked together is a refreshing and empowering co-op experience. Playing with friends is always a good time, but together really lets you create a world to share with your buddies and make it your own. If you're a Souls fan, you value games that don't hold your hand and give you freedom to make decisions, and that's what you get with No Rest for the Wicked. So what do you think about No Rest for the Wicked? Have you tried it out, or if you haven't, is the Together update enough to get you to jump in? If you want to check out No Rest for the Wicked, click on the Steam link in the description and in the pinned comment. They've really sweetened the pot by doing both a free weekend right now until January 26th and a 40% off sale on the already reduced early access price. This is a one-time sale and the game will be full price at launch, so if you're considering playing it now or when 1.0 comes out, I'd jump on it. That link also lets them know that I sent you and I'm worth collaborating with, so it's also a great way to support the channel and more No Rest for the Wicked videos. You can also support the channel and more No Rest for the Wicked content by liking this video and subscribing to the Lore Hunter. As always, thanks for your support, thank you Moon Studios for sponsoring this video, and thanks for watching.